What's up, YouTube? Today I'm going to talk through some of the options that I've considered as an alternative to the Z06 while I have a lot of time on my hands. Before you can talk about which cars you would consider, you need to set a couple ground rules, and that's for very good reason. First, you want to think about what are the priorities you have for the car, what matters to you. You can sum up what you want with a lot of details, but ultimately it comes down to just a couple things. Listing out 20 must-haves, you're never going to find the car. Heck, even 10 must-haves, you're probably going to muddle what actually matters to you about the car. So for example, do you really care about deviated stitching or what color brake calipers you have compared to the driving characteristics and the performance of the car? So to start this conversation, I've distilled it down to 3 priorities for me. So first for me, it's gotta be engaging to drive. I wanna be able to feel the road through the car. I wanna know what the tires are doing. I need to feel part of that. There needs to be a connection to the car. Next, and really important, the car has to thrill me. It doesn't have to be the fastest car out there. It doesn't have to beat all of the comparison tests, but it does have to have that heart-pounding feeling and do something that thrills you. I'm not going to spend a dime on a car that doesn't give me that excitement. And last, the car needs to feel special. It has to have that sense of occasion, that little feeling of something extra. My C7 Grand Sport, for example, has that feeling. Driving around, you get stares from other drivers, other people who see the car. You get thumbs up as you pull up at a light. When you get in the car, you get that smell of leather and performance and just that extra feeling. And that feeling, that's something that's really special. And some cars have it and some just don't. Every time I get into the Grand Sport, I think, holy cow, how did I earn this? That's that feeling I'm going for. So I also want to make a quick comment on used cars. I can hear you. Hey Fred, what about used cars? You could get an Audi R8, a Gen 5 Viper, a Jaguar F-Type. There's a whole bunch of other used cars that give you a ton of performance for the money. Heck, even an old Ferrari. But I've got an answer for you. This, right here, the C7 Grand Sport. It's a manual, I've owned it from day one, and it has every ounce of performance, fun, and character that I'm really looking for in the next car. It is every bit as good as any of those cars, and in most cases, it's actually faster on a track. Stepping into a used car can be a great opportunity, and once I build a new garage, hopefully soon, I'll be able to do that and try out some things that I've never actually wanted to buy new. However, right now, while the number of cars I can store is limited, the C7 Grand Sport honestly checks all the boxes, and I know the entire backstory of the car. And just a quick note for those who don't think the Grand Sport has enough performance, in the 2016 Lightning Lap hosted by Car and Driver, which is an event from 2006 to present day where they compare all of the top drivers' cars, the Grand Sport actually beat out the 570S, the NSX, the R8, and the GT4. It's a legitimate upper crust performance car. So that's why I'm not going used. Alright, so what cars have caught my eye? Well, to be honest, it's actually a pretty small list, and it actually all comes from one brand. Porsche. Well, I can't afford a 911 GT3 right now, and even if I could, the allocations for them are so limited and incredibly marked up, that's not really an option. So I looked at the 911 992 GTS, as well as I briefly looked at the GT4. If you're new to the channel, you may not realize that I am just as big a Porsche fan as I am a fan of the Corvette. I've had a lot of seat time in various modern Porsches and absolutely love them. And while the GT3 has been one of my dream cars for a long time, it's still quite a bit out of range for me. If I'm being realistic, well, more realistic, the GTS is probably that sweet spot for me, at least at my current budget. So for those who aren't Porsche fans, what is the 911 GTS? Well, it's basically the 911 Carrera S with pretty much every single option checked, provided to you at a bit of a discount. You can get center lock wheels, you can get the 918 Spider carbon seats, a couple additional unique styling cues, and you can get it with a manual, as well as if you want, you can get all-wheel drive. It's more day-to-day drivable than a 911 GT3, easier to live with, and it offers very close performance on the track while being $30,000 to $40,000 less for the base price. Alright, so going through those 3 criteria I mentioned earlier, does it check the boxes? Engaging to drive. As the 911 GTS is brand new, I haven't had the opportunity to drive one myself. However, I've driven quite a few of the modern Porsches, both mid-engine and rear-engine, and every single one is as good, if not better, than the last. They're absolutely sublime. You can feel the road, you feel part of the car, the sound of the engines is fantastic, the balance, the poise, the handling. There's no slop in any of the controls. Everything feels just tight and responsive, while still being comfortable and something that you can spend a long drive in. I did an 18-hour stint once in a Boxster, straight from New Hampshire all the way down to South Carolina in one shot without stopping other than for gas and food. And I arrived feeling just as refreshed as when I got in the car and would have been fine to turn around and drive back. For those that haven't experienced it, Porsche is one of those brands where they've polished and polished and polished to really refine the platform that they offer, and it absolutely speaks to anyone who drives one. It's one of those things that even after you drive one, you're still thinking about it long afterwards. So on to the next criteria. Does it thrill me? Having done launch control a bunch of times in a 911 GT3 from the prior generation, I can absolutely say that a 992 certainly would. The GTS actually has very similar horsepower to the 911 GT3, but it actually has nearly 100 pounds more torque. Feeling a car that can accelerate from 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds is certainly thrilling enough for me. So it's engaging and it's thrilling, but let me ask this, does it feel special? If you've never had the opportunity to sit in a Porsche or ride in one, much less drive one, go add that to your to-do list. I mean it. Find a friend that has one, find somebody you know that drives one. Heck, you can even go to a Porsche Experience Center and rent one, but find an opportunity to get behind the wheel of one of these cars. It doesn't even really matter what generation of cars or what model. I've been in Porsches as far back as the 70s and as modern as the current generation of cars, and all of them have been fantastic and felt special. They have that X factor. You get into them and you can tell that there's an attention to detail and a feeling of craftsmanship that's very different than your run-of-the-mill average cars. While a lot of cars can be comfortable, sound good, or be fast, anything from the Porsche lineup that starts with the letters GT is definitely a cut above. There's that intangible feeling of motorsport. Matt Farah from The Smoking Tire, he frequently talks about that motorsport feel and that how some cars have it and some cars don't. It's a little bit hard to put your finger on, but it's a feeling that cars that were designed to be on a racetrack tend to have. Cars either have it or not, and Porsche does. So it does check all three boxes for me. Now getting back to the task at hand, what about the 911 GTS in light of the C8 Z06? That's what we're really here to find out. Now back at the start of this video, I pointed out you needed to narrow down the priorities you had for the car. Since both cars check all three boxes, you have to start splitting hairs and start finding where do they differentiate themselves. So first, a note on the thrills. While the GTS is a very fast, capable car, keep in mind what Chevy has actually been benchmarking the Z06 against. Another car in that 911 lineup from Porsche, and that's the GT2 RS. Arguably one of the best cars and fastest cars that they've ever made. GM's not even comparing it to the GT3, even though there are some similarities because of the high revving naturally aspirated motors. They're going right to the GT2 RS, which is the upper crust of performance. Even more in the Z06's favor is that throughout testing, that GT2 RS has been spotted with all of the test cars. Not just at the beginning, but as recent as last week in my prior video, GM has been continually testing the cars, making sure that they are comparable rivals. So the GTS, while fast, is probably not going to hold a candle to the performance that the Z06 offers. The next differentiator here is money. I'd be crazy to not mention that, and that even though it's not one of the final deciding factors for me, it's still something to really take into consideration. A moderately spec'd 911 GTS costs about $167,000. I went on the configurator and spec'd out the car the way that I would want it, and it's more than half of the cost of my house. That's even more than the base price for the 911 GT3, which is arguably the one to have if you can afford it. More than that, it's about $40,000 more than the top price that I would expect to spend for a Z06 outfitted the way that I would want. It's just too much money for me. I'm a small YouTuber, and honestly, I afford my cars the old-fashioned way. I save up for a really long time. Now, I want to digress for a second. I did actually make 2 videos in the last year or so about how I saved up to buy the C7 Grand Sport, as well as how I plan to save up for the C8 Z06. Now, while we're on the topic of money, I do hear you asking, hey Fred, what about the GT4? By all accounts, it's a fantastic car, and it's much more reasonably priced. Well, you're right. Spec'd with medium level options, it's about $113,000, which is still a lot of money, but way less than what that GTS is coming to. The problem there is that at that price point, which is right there with the Z06, I believe the Z06 is going to absolutely wipe the floor with the GT4 performance-wise. For about the same amount of money, the Z06, You can get 250 more horsepower, 161 more pound-feet of torque, and the car is an outright monster that punches much higher up into the class of supercars. That big gap in performance is honestly too big to ignore for the same amount of money. And the last big differentiator for me is something I'm going to call the Corvette Factor. Now hear me out. Up until recently, I'd never even thought of this. It's the idea that I've had such a great experience with my C7 Grand Sport that I honestly think GM has really earned first shot at my business. And I mean, it's been great. I've had no serious issues. The service and dealership experience has been absolutely amazing. Shout out to McMulkin because honestly, they are fantastic. If you ever get a chance to work with them, I really highly suggest it. And most of all, the car has made every single driving experience that I've had in it special and fun. That counts for a huge amount. While Porsche certainly deserves to be considered, and as I said, I'm a huge fan. I would love to own one. But a lot of the factors I highlighted in this video are the exact same reasons why I ended up with the C7 Grand Sport over the Cayman S 5 years ago when I bought this car. GM builds cars with better bang for the buck than anything else out there that I'm aware of, and simply can't be ignored if you're a car enthusiast. So to tie this all together, Chevy has never built a car like the C8 Z06. They haven't in the past, and they may not again in the future, or at least not without hybridization or full electrification. I want to be a part of that. I want to lean into some of that heritage, and honestly, I just want the Corvette more. I think no matter what, there will always be used Porsches to buy. And as I said before, all prior generations of Porsche that I've been in or driven have been fantastic cars, so I'm not really concerned about the inability to get one at some point in the future. I'm confident in the fact that once I build a new garage, I will end up with a Porsche, but right now the clock is ticking on a high-revving, naturally aspirated motor, and I think it's time for the Corvette. Quick shout out that I built a new Facebook page and Instagram account for Fred's Full Throttle, so feel free to subscribe or check those out, or whatever you have to click on to do that. I'm kind of learning as I go. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider giving me a subscribe. That really helps me out. So thank you for watching, and until next time, Fred out.